Hello, I'm Dee Dee Pierce, and I am an early childhood curriculum specialist. My focus is in literacy.
And I'm Connie Malacote, and I'm also an early childhood curriculum specialist, and my focus is mathematics.
The purpose of this video today is to highlight key aspects of Module 1 that can help you as you begin your purposeful planning with your team or the PUT process.
Last year, the math teacher work group collaborated to determine which pages from the module overviews to keep and print for you, as well as the student pages. You can go to engagenewyork.org should you want more information for your own learning or for your students.
Items that you may wish to have available during this video are the math instructional sequence and the Module 1 lessons and overview.
Here are the lessons.
And you might find it useful to pause at certain times in this video for team discussions.
Beginning your first full day of kindergarten when all your students are present, you will likely want to start using your math intervention block to model and practice two critical things. One being productive talk between partners. So having partners share or turn-in talks, it's that modeling and practicing over and over again how that looks and how that feels with 5-year-olds. The second thing is manipulatives. What are your classroom procedures for manipulatives? How do you go retrieve them? How do you use them? What do we do, and more importantly, not do with manipulatives? And how to put them back. What are your cleanup procedures? Those two things are going to be very, very critical even on the very first day of core mathematics.
As we know that, especially for kindergartners, we know that that can make or break a whole lesson, and getting them started off in the beginning is great because Engage New York jumps right in with having them be responsible for their own mathematics. So speaking of them, many of the manipulatives that you might be using during a lesson could be something that you have in your classroom, or it might not. Several of them can be exchanged for something that you already have, so be creative and flexible in your thinking. If it calls for little beans, maybe you don't have those, but you have a small block or something like that that you could use instead. As long as the concept is taught and learned, then that is the most important part.
Another tip that we highly suggest is that you get a timer if you don't have one, or use your cell phone to be able to set a timer. You will soon see that Engage New York has 4 components every single day, and that they're timed out for you. And each of those need to be honored. And what has been noticed in the past with 3rd through 5th grade teachers, they have been very frank and very open, and we appreciate that feedback, that once you get teaching and you're going through your lesson, you tend to extend the time further than what you had hoped, and you rob students of that debriefing time, and that is so critical for students to have that opportunity, the chance to talk and reflect on their learning. So please, and right off the bat, please get a timer and set a timer. I think it'll pay off when you start these lessons. The modules are broken up into topics. And in a minute here, we're going to talk about the topics. And for kindergarten, for the first one, it goes from A through H.
So one thing you might want, or you might have questions about, are what about those daily math routines that we've been doing? With Engage New York, we want you to honor each component of Engage New York, and so within the math block, that is what you will be taking place. Outside of the math core block, if you should have extra time in your instructional day and you want to implement some of those practices, such as how many days we've been in school or the number collection tool, if you have time and as that is allowed, then you're welcome to do that.
Another question that you might have is the assessment piece. In the past, we have religiously and consistently used the KPR assessment cards, and those have been working very well with Common Core and with the data that we've needed to collect and use to know more about our students. If you go to engagenewyork.org, you will see that there are mid and end of module assessments. During this year, we are not going to require those. They are excellent. They're a very good tool. If you want to gain more information about your students or use it as a formative checkpoint for maybe between topics, you are welcome to use these assessments. Some teachers who piloted this found them to be useful, but please understand they are not required. Our goal this year is to continue to focus on our Ames Web screeners as well as our KPR.
That's right. So we're going to go ahead and begin just with a quick overview about the topics in Module 1 and kind of give you just a place and a mindset of where this module begins and where it's heading, so you can plan with the end in mind.
All right, so I'm going to start with topic A. It's very quick. You only have 3 lessons, and the fluency piece is really focusing around counting. You're going to be thinking of counting in different ways, more like sequence counting, both forward and backwards. The kids will be counting objects and doing some one-to-one correspondence. So just know, even in the fluency piece, you're going to have manipulatives right off the bat. So make sure that you have taken some time to understand what materials that you need for each of the 4 pieces of Engage New York. And speaking of manipulatives, if you think of your fingers of manipulatives, especially with kindergartners, Engage New York embraces the idea that when we use our fingers as manipulatives, we are going to use our left, let me get you on camera here. Scoot over, Dee Dee. Yeah, we're going to use our left pinky as the starting point for counting for 1. And they have provided you visuals in the lessons for you to be able to see that. But just know for staff members that this might be tricky. This is not something that we're probably used to. Right. Most people start with their index finger and they start counting from there. Just know consistently they start with the left hand and the left pinky. So we want to make sure that we practice that with the kids and teach them that it's okay if we mess up and start counting with a different finger.
And on that note, as a teacher, you'll want to remember that their left is your right. So as you're teaching them, you're going to start with your right, that they're going to see it as the left.
Yep, and that's an excellent point. So under the application and concept development portion, vocabulary is going to be very critical in this module and especially in this topic, because we're going to be looking at analyzing and classifying. So if you think about analyzing, that is being able to use attributes and being able to describe very well why they're going to classify the way they are going to classify. So we want to make sure that our vocabulary is rigorous. We want to make sure that the kids are hearing words that we want them to hear. One example that they give in there is we want to start saying exactly the same, not just the same, but exactly the same. So there are little pieces throughout the lessons that you want to pay attention to when it comes to vocabulary, because the more that we say them, and we expect each other to say them, the more the kids will start to use it in their language, and that is going to definitely pay off. Students debrief in lesson 1 right off the bat, and that is really important because it really honors mathematical practice 3, constructing viable arguments and opportunities to defend your thinking. So way down even at kindergarten, we start out on day 1 having kids defend their thinking, justifying the way they described maybe an object through attributes and or classifying. So we want to make sure that we, again, go back to that partner talk, what are our classroom's expectations for that, and allowing that time to let kids talk through the work that they did. It's going to be so critical.
Exactly. In topic B, the lessons continue to build on the attributes of the objects, but with the purpose of classifying them into categories. Once this is done, students start counting the objects within the categories to determine what the quantity of that category is. When counting to determine these quantities, students start learning that the last number counted or said indicates the total objects of group within that group. Students then begin identifying groups according to how many objects are in each group, such as, I have a group of 3 moons, but you have 2 birds in your group. So they'll use vocabulary such as what is in their group and the number that is correlated along with the objects in that group.
Topic C just carries on from there, and it's a continuation of that counting piece that I mentioned in A. And now we're going to sort up to 5 objects. And they also introduce the concept of a horizontal or a linear as well as a vertical representation. So we want to make sure, again, that we're embedding that vocabulary when we work with kids with that, and it's done manipulatively as well as on the paper. Problem sets for the students are done in different ways. We want to show you just a visual, and again, Engage Your Work does a very good job of providing visuals in case something isn't clear. But here's just an example. So we have the linear representation. We have an array representation, circular, and then scattered. Just know that some of the lessons have maybe just one, some of them will have all four. So just know that when we're visiting with kids about this, that they understand that there are different ways to configure their sets. Another thing that is going to be a very big part of Topic C is the idea of writing an expression with the kids. We want them to see that when they decompose, say, numbers 3, 4, and 5, because these are the primary numbers you're going to be working with in C, that we are writing an expression for them so that they can see that that's one way to represent decomposition is through an expression. So again, it's that early exposure, but frequent exposure of decomposition. A resource that is referred to in Topic C is a Rec and Rec. Most of us in the district that are veterans are accustomed to using a Rec and Rec and or have been trained on that. We want to hold them up for you just in case if you're new to kindergarten or the primary grade levels, we want to show you what they look like. Here's a student Rec and Rec. And now, hopefully on the video we can fit the large one. We'll show you the teacher, the ginormous Rec and Rec. This is a very, very important tool that's used in Engage New York, as well as it could be used obviously during your tier intervention time. However, if you have never been trained how to use a Rec and Rec, please contact your coach, ask for support on that, and or a colleague that is very familiar with the proper ways to use a Rec and Rec and how to successfully use it with students. Or you can get a hold of Dee Dee or me, and we'll be more than happy to come out and work with you on that. We just want to make sure we're using that tool in the correct fashion. You're also going to notice in Topic C that it's the foundational or very beginning steps of a number talk. They start to bleed in quick looks, which for those of you that are, again, are veterans, this is something that we're used to doing. And so you'll start to see that common language of I'm going to hold a card up, it has some dots on it, they're going to have a conversation about it, call out how many they see. So you're going to see that starting to be threaded in Topic C. And that's a very important concept when it comes to subitizing. So not only counting, but students will also be starting to write already in Topic C. So we want to make sure that we're working on that mathematical penmanship as well as the oral vocabulary and the manipulative-based learning.
So that brings us to Topic D. And just know that through Topics A and C, students have been engaged in classifying these groups of objects and counting them within the groups to determine their numerical value. But in Topic D, we explore that concept of 0 as a quantity. It's kind of always a fun mystery kind of a number. And we continued the decomposition work that you began in Topic C, but we're going to add in the use of the equal sign, so then it becomes an equation, not just an expression. So that's basically what happens in Topic D.
Okay. So you can see that through each of these topics, you're just building, each time adding on another layer, which makes it really useful and nice, not only for you, but for the students, that you're not jumping all over the place. All right, Topic E, moving on. We're going to continue growing their skills and their knowledge in counting, organizing, and writing, but this time we're going to go up to 8. We're going to provide students the opportunity to have discussions about their number of objects that they have with different configurations. So, for example, if Dee Dee and I are partners and we do have that partner talk time, she may have 7 bears, I may have 7 bears, but her configuration may be different. Dee Dee may decide to put hers in a circle, I may decide to put mine in an array or a linear version, but the important part of this conversation is expecting students to have that conversation about our configurations. Dee Dee's is 7 or 8 and mine is 7 or 8 if we're equal, but what are the similarities or the differences between our two sets? What makes our work that we represented on our desks the same? What makes it different? Even if we have the same amount. Exactly. Because it can look very different to a 5-year-old when it is done in a circular configuration or a linear. So it's really important to allow that talk time. And if you need to, obviously a lot of modeling with that. We're also going to develop the concept of part, whole when it comes to topic E. So, for example, if they have 8 beans, they need to recognize that 6 is part of the 8. Again, focusing on that part, whole, or that decomposition of 8.
So in topic F, students will continue counting to determine the quantities. It'll be getting more complex though, because the numbers will be getting bigger. And students learn to be flexible with their numbers up to the number 10. They'll be continuing to emphasize that number 5 and how that is a reference point. And students will be ready to do that fun part of acting out story problems even when the result is unknown. So that's a fun one.
Yes, and story problems, as we all know, are such an important part of mathematics, especially when we make them exactly what's going on in their lives or school, that's that true application time, so that will be very important. Topics G and H are very, very similar in the sense that students begin to learn and practice and understand that each successive number name refers to the quantity that is one greater. So in G, we will be working on that concept of adding on one more or counting on one more. Where in H, it ends up going the other direction where we're going to do one less. So why is this important? We all know that this leads to 2 big concepts. One being that concept of being able to conserve that number that you had and being able to count on from there. The second one is, as you know, in kindergarten as well as enormous in first grade, is addition and subtraction. So we want kids to be able to count on and count backwards by 1. That wraps up our sharing of Module 1. Should you have any questions or want modeled lessons or need to have conversations or planning conversations, we are always just an email away or a call away. We're going to hold up our email addresses here in a second for those of us that don't know us.
So my email is just the initial D, Pierce@usd259.net.
And I'm C. Malicoat, and I'll spell my last name for you, MALICOAT, and same thing at usd259.net. Again, we're just a phone call or an email away. We are more than happy to come out and work with you.
That's right. Thank you.